think we can all agree the housing market in Australia and around the world is pretty cooked. The median house price in the major cities is around $900 to $1 million. Never thought I would reference Sky News, but what's causing this? Now, if you would listen to this vlog, you'd assume the problem relied around spending. People are buying a coffee every day, so they can't afford $1 million property. And this guy will probably tell us next time he puts his face on a new billboard. So we're gonna try and work this out ourselves. This is a classic game of Monopoly. Cheers. So the difference between a game of Monopoly and life is that everyone starts from the same spot. When you start a new game of Monopoly with your family before the tears set in and the yelling, you all get the same amount of money, you start from the same spot on the board, and a lot of the luck comes down to the roll of the dice. But the real world is more like a never-ending game of Monopoly, where new players are joining all the time. And if you didn't start at the beginning, you're in a bit of trouble. Imagine joining a game of Monopoly with a couple $100, with only 2 or 3 properties left. I wouldn't like your odds, but that's kind of the game we're all playing now. So let's start with the first problem, and that will be price. Now, if you were to play Monopoly in the 90s, let's say old Fleet Street, you're paying about $220 for it. Not bad. Now, if you were to be playing Monopoly in 2025, that same property is going to cost around $3,000. So instead of 4 times the average salary, it's 10 times the average salary, which means you're going to have to be going past go around 15 times before you can actually pay for that property. And while you're making your way around the board 15 times with very few properties left, you've got to make sure you don't land on any of the actual rental properties. Because instead of it costing at Leicester Square $40, that bad boy's rocking a hotel. So you're paying $1,150 if you land on that square. So not only are you having to go around the actual board 15 times to collect enough to get the property you need, there's also very few properties available. And as well as that, make sure you're not landing on any actual properties on the way through, because that is going to deeply hurt your ability to save, which is a big issue now we're facing. Not many properties available, prices are ranging from $1 million in the major cities, and rent is sky high. But in the game, Monopoly does try and even the playing board a little bit with the players that have got ahead with certain community chest cards. This one, for example, says you have to pay $40 for each house and $115 for each hotel you have on your properties. Now that might help a little bit in the game, but in real life, you'd be okay. Because fortunately for property investors, you can negatively gear your properties. So let's say I get around this board and I don't land on any of your properties. That means you're not making any rent. And if you're not making any rent, that asset is considered a loss. So the government allows you to deduct that loss on your actual taxable income. So it's a bit of a win-win. You're actually getting compensated for your investment. So while I'm going around trying to dodge your rental properties, you're accumulating more rent or being allowed to deduct any missed rent by the government. So unlike any other investment, whether it be shares, businesses, property allows you to actually be okay even when you make a loss. You don't need to sell that property. You can just simply take it off your tax or not pay for the community chest. And if you feel like you've got a few too many properties and you want to get rid of a couple, you get a discount on your capital gains tax. When you sell an investment property, you tax on your profit, your capital gain. But in Australia, if you held the property for more than 12 months, you get a 50% discount on that taxable gain. So for example, you buy a property for $500,000 and you sell it for $700,000 with a profit of $200,000, but with the capital gains discount, only $100K is counted. And look, lowering taxes on people to get ahead, I don't mind that. But when the people already ahead, say the guys that have 15 properties, are taking advantage of those discounts, it doesn't really help the guys spending 15 laps around the board to try and get one home. All it's doing is allowing those guys to buy more of those properties. So while you try to get around the board to get Fleet Street, you might get picked at the post. So that's the thing with Monopoly, right? Once all the properties are gone, it's over. Because it's impossible to add more properties to the game, which isn't too dissimilar to the real world. There is a huge housing crisis because there is a lack of houses. And this is for many reasons. Firstly, slow construction and previous governments not building enough properties. zoning and planning laws, allowing people to actually confront the governments and councils to stop them rezoning and planning their suburbs, and also unoccupied housing. A lot of these investors that have a lot of these properties who can negative gear these properties don't actually have to put people in the properties because they're not getting penalised for it. So similar to a monopoly board, no one is currently living in a lot of these houses, but when you do, you've got to pay the rent. And another issue, and the only issue you really see on the mainstream media, is that there's too many players. More people, immigrants, are playing the game, making it harder for bloody everyone else to get involved. If you didn't have these players in the first place, maybe you could afford a home. But really, as we can see, there are a multitude of other problems we should be and could be fixing to actually sort out this problem. Because we need immigration to help us grow as a country. Getting rid of them would have a far more negative effect on this country than getting rid of investors or capping investors and removing tax incentives for investors. So there are a multitude of things we can do to actually improve the housing issue in Australia. Firstly, improve supply. Unfortunately, the latest government is putting way more effort into supplying new homes compared to the previous governments. Yes, we've got a long way to go. The next thing we can do is rezoning. Rezoning streets and suburbs that allow for more high-rise buildings to fit more people in. The next thing we can do is removing negative gearing and capital gains, removing incentives for investors to buy more property or keep property off the market. However, the one actual party that tried to remove these, the Labor Party, lost 2 consecutive elections with these policies. So I don't think we're going to be seeing them come up anytime soon. Or we could even at least start by penalising any investor or landowner that keeps their property unoccupied, allowing for thousands of homes to come on the market. But honestly, if you're a young person struggling to buy your first home, your best option is to buy into money. Start hanging out in nice areas at nice bars, looking for consultants, doctors, kids that went to private schools. Buy into a family where you don't have to worry about this, and you can start voting Liberal and not care about the world. That is your best bet to get out of this situation. Or you could just imagine what owning a home is by playing a good old game of Monopoly. Cheers.
Take me to the April sun and